Nero Wolfe and the Glass Fortress. It was a Wednesday, 11 minutes past 9 in the evening, when Nero Wolfe's carefully constructed universe first showed signs of cracking. I was at my desk in the office, typing up the final invoice for the Halstead insurance fraud case, a tedious affair involving a theatrical limp and a very real greed, when the doorbell rang. Not the polite, hesitant ring of a potential client, but 3 sharp bursts that said urgent in a language even the dogs understood. Caesar, who'd been sprawled near Wolfe's desk like a 140-pound sphinx, lifted his massive head. Mars moved from his position by the red leather chair to the office door with the silent efficiency of a professional bodyguard. Apollo was already at the front hall window, his ears forward, before I'd even pushed back from my typewriter. Wolfe, settled in his oversized chair with a copy of The Evolution of Orchid Cultivation in the Andean Highlands, didn't look up. Archie, the door. My legs were getting restless anyway, I said, and headed for the front hall. Through the bulletproof glass panel beside the door, installed 6 months ago after what Wolfe called that regrettable pistol incident, I could see a young man in a courier's uniform. He was perhaps 25, with the kind of nervous energy that suggested he'd either drunk too much coffee or not enough whiskey. His hand trembled as he held out a manila envelope. I opened the door 6 inches. The chain was engaged. Yes, Archie Goodwin. That depends on who's asking and why. I was told to deliver this to you personally. No one else. He thrust the envelope forward. I was paid $200 to make sure it reached your hands tonight. The man who hired me said. He swallowed hard. He said my life might depend on it reaching you before 10 o'clock. That's the kind of opener that gets my attention. What? I unhooked the chain and took the envelope. It was sealed with red wax. No return address and addressed in block letters. Archie Goodwin, personal, urgent. The courier was already backing down the steps. Wait, who hired you? I don't know his name. He paid cash. He was. The young man paused on the sidewalk, looking left and right along West 35th Street. He was bleeding from his side. He said if I didn't deliver this by 10, someone else would die. I don't want any part of whatever this is, Mr. Goodwin. I did my job. I'm out. He turned and walked fast toward 10th Avenue, glancing over his shoulder twice. I closed the door, engaged both locks and the chain, and returned to the office. Minerva, the strategist of our canine quintet, had moved to a position where she could watch both the front hall and Wolfe simultaneously. Diana, the youngest and quickest, sat alert near the window overlooking the garden, her head cocked as if listening for sounds beyond normal human range. Someone paid a frightened courier $200 to deliver this to me, I said, holding up the envelope. The sender was bleeding and predicted someone would die if it didn't arrive by 10 o'clock. That gives us 47 minutes to decide if we care. Wolfe turned a page. We don't. I haven't opened it yet. The contents are irrelevant. We have no client, no retainer, and I am reading. I sat at my desk and broke the wax seal. Inside was a security keycard, the expensive kind with an embedded chip, a photograph, and a single sheet of paper. I looked at the photograph first. It showed a man falling past a wall of glass windows. Not jumping, falling. His arms were outstretched, his face contorted in terror, and behind him, barely visible in the reflection, was another face watching from inside the building. The photograph was remarkably clear, taken with a professional camera, and time-stamped, Monday 2:47 p.m. 2 days ago. The note was typed on expensive linen paper. He saw too much from inside the glass fortress. They killed him for it. Now they know someone took this picture. The keycard opens level 72. If you don't investigate, they'll bury the truth with me, and then they'll come for you. You have 48 hours. No signature. I stood and walked to Wolfe's desk, placing the photograph where it would interrupt his line of sight. A falling man, a threat, and a security card to a place called the Glass Fortress. Wolfe's eyes moved from the page to the photograph. For 3 seconds I counted. He studied the image. Then he closed his book with the careful precision of a man containing his irritation. The Glass Fortress is the colloquial name for Vannick Tower, he said. Completed last year, 83 stories of glass and steel at 6th Avenue and 48th Street. Charles Vannick's monument to transparent commerce. Though I suspect the transparency ends at the windows. You know about it? Mr. Brenner of the Gazette wrote a rather extensive profile 3 months ago. Mr. Vannick made his fortune in telecommunications and defense contracting. He claims his building represents a new era of corporate openness. The architecture critics called it either visionary or vulgar, depending on their politics. Wolfe pushed the photograph back toward me. This is not our concern. Someone thinks it is. Someone is mistaken. Someone is also bleeding and running out of time, as is my patience. It is 9:23. I read from 9 to 11. You know the schedule, Archie. That's when we heard the gunshot. It wasn't close, maybe half a block away, but in the relative quiet of a Wednesday night in our neighborhood, it cracked through the air like a whip. All 5 dogs reacted instantly. Caesar was on his feet, a low growl rumbling from his chest. Mars moved to Wolfe, positioning himself between his master and the window. Apollo's hackles rose as he stared toward the front of the brownstone. Minerva's eyes tracked the room, calculating threats and exits. Diana was already at the office door, ready to move. I went to the window and looked through the bulletproof glass toward the street. A car was stopped under the streetlight on the corner, a dark sedan with the engine running. As I watched, it pulled away fast, tires squealing. The phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. Goodwin. It was Inspector Kramer, and he sounded grim. Stay inside. Lock your doors. There's been a shooting on your block. We heard it. Where? Right outside your gate. Uniformed officers are on the way. The victim is dead. Single shot to the head. Professional work. A pause. Archie. The victim is carrying a camera with a telephoto lens and a press credential. Name is Bernard Lassiter. Freelance photographer. Does that mean anything to you? I looked at the photograph on Wolfe's desk. It might. I'm coming over. Don't touch anything. Don't leave the building. And for God's sake, tell Wolfe I'm not in the mood for his games tonight. He hung up. Wolfe had risen from his chair, a rare sight, given that vertical movement was something he considered a necessary evil, like taxation, and was standing at the window. Caesar stood beside him, alert and watchful. The other dogs had formed a loose perimeter around the office, each facing a different direction. They knew Kramer, certainly. They'd seen him dozens of times over the years, but they also knew tension when they felt it, and right now the brownstone thrummed with it like a plucked string. Someone delivered a photograph of a murder, I said. Then someone murdered the photographer, and someone fired a shot outside our door 30 minutes after the package arrived. That's not coincidence. No, Wolfe said slowly. It's a declaration. Of what? War, Archie. Someone has declared war and chosen our doorstep as the battlefield. He returned to his desk and lowered himself into his chair with a sigh. Call Saul, Fred, and Ori. I want them here by 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. And call Mr. Parker. Theodore Parker was the lawyer Wolfe used when things got complicated. You're taking the case, I said. I'm defending my home. There's a difference. He picked up the photograph again. This man, this falling man, saw something from level 72 of the glass fortress. Someone killed him for it. Someone photographed his murder. And now someone has killed the photographer and announced their intentions at our gate. This is no longer a request for investigation, Archie. It's an invasion. He looked at Caesar, who met his gaze with dark, intelligent eyes. We have been invaded, and Nero Wolfe does not retreat. Inspector Kramer arrived 22 minutes later, accompanied by 2 patrol officers and a very short fuse. The dogs knew him the moment he stepped into the office. Mars actually relaxed slightly, and Diana stopped her circuit of the room, but they maintained their alert status. They could read the room better than most humans I'd known. Kramer was a solid block of a man, somewhere north of 50, with iron-grey hair and the permanently skeptical expression of someone who'd heard every lie the human race could manufacture. He dropped into the red leather chair without waiting for an invitation, pulled out a cigar, and pointed it at Wolfe like an accusation. Bernard Lassiter, age 42, freelance photographer, found dead on your sidewalk at 9:27 p.m. with a 9mm bullet in his brain. No witnesses, no shell casing, which tells me the shooter was professional enough to use a revolver or police his brass. The only thing in Lassiter's pockets besides his wallet and press credential was this. He tossed a business card onto Wolfe's desk. I could read it from my desk. Nero Wolfe, Private Investigations. Your card, Wolfe. In a dead man's pocket. Want to tell me why? Wolfe opened his center desk drawer and removed the manila envelope. This arrived at 9:11 p.m. Mr. Lassiter delivered it, indirectly. Read the contents and you'll have your answer. Kramer read the note twice, studied the photograph for a long minute, and examined the keycard. His face went from skeptical to dark. Who sent this? Unknown. The falling man in this photo, when was this taken? Monday at 2:47 p.m., according to the timestamp. Monday. Kramer leaned back. We had a jumper at Vannick Tower Monday afternoon. Charles Vannick's office called it in themselves, said one of their engineers. Dr. Quinn Thatcher jumped from a 72nd floor window. Suicide. Corporate stress. They had a whole PR statement prepared within an hour. Clean, tidy, case closed. Except it wasn't suicide, I said. Except now I'm looking at a photograph that suggests it wasn't. Kramer bit down on his unlit cigar. And 12 hours later, the photographer who took this picture is murdered outside your brownstone. That's not corporate damage control. That's organized crime methodology. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced across his middle seventh of a ton. Inspector, what do you know about Charles Vannick? Plenty, and all of it makes me nervous. Kramer stood and walked to the window, looking out at the street where his officers were still working the scene. Vannick made his first fortune in telecommunications in the 90s. Then he moved into defense contracting, satellites, secure communications, surveillance technology. His company, Vannick Consolidated, has contracts with half a dozen three-letter agencies. The man has friends in very high places and lawyers who could litigate God into a settlement. A dangerous man to investigate. A dangerous man to accuse, Kramer corrected. The jumper, Dr. Thatcher, was a physicist, worked on something classified in Vannick's research division. When he took his dive Monday afternoon, Vannick's people had the police commissioner's office on the phone within minutes. The investigation was shut down before it began. Suicide, case closed, family paid off, no questions. But you have questions. Kramer turned from the window. I'm a cop, Wolfe. I always have questions, but I also have a chain of command, and right now that chain is telling me to leave Charles Vannick alone, unless I want to spend my retirement years directing traffic in Staten Island. He pointed at the photograph. This changes things. If Thatcher was murdered, and if Lassiter was killed because he photographed it, then we're looking at conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, and God knows what else. But I need evidence, real evidence, the kind that can stand up against Vannick's lawyers. Then we share a common goal, Wolfe said. Do we? Kramer's eyes narrowed. Or are you about to tell me you're staying out of it? 3 hours ago, I would have told you precisely that. But someone killed a man on my sidewalk. Someone sent a threat to my home. Someone has decided that Nero Wolfe is either an ally or an obstacle. He paused. I choose ally. Not to justice, necessarily. Justice is your department, Inspector. But to truth. Someone knows the truth about Dr. Thatcher's death. I intend to extract it. And if Vannick's people come after you? Wolfe glanced at Caesar, who stood watchful near his chair, then at Mars, Apollo, Minerva, and Diana positioned throughout the office. Let them try. Kramer almost smiled. All right, but I need your word on something. If you find evidence, real, admissible evidence, you bring it to me. No games, no grandstanding, no newspapers. You have my word. Then I'll tell you what else I know. Kramer sat down again. Dr. Quinn Thatcher wasn't just any physicist. He had top-secret clearance. He worked on Project Helix, a classified defense contract involving satellite surveillance and encrypted communications. According to Vannick's official statement, Thatcher was depressed. Personal problems. But here's what they didn't release. 2 weeks before his death, Thatcher tried to resign. Vannick rejected the resignation. Said Thatcher's work was too critical, his knowledge too sensitive. He offered Thatcher a raise, a promotion, everything. Thatcher refused. He wanted out. And 2 weeks later, he fell from a window. Or was pushed. Kramer tapped the photograph. This image shows someone watching from inside the building. Can you identify them? I picked up the photo and studied it under my desk lamp. The reflection in the glass was blurred, indistinct, just a shadow of a face, not without enhancement, but a professional lab might be able to work with it. I'll have our tech people look at it. Quietly. Kramer stood. Wolfe, I'm trusting you on this, but be careful. Vannick has resources you can't imagine. He owns a private security firm, ex-military, ex-intelligence. If you start poking around, they'll notice." "Let them," Wolfe said. "I conduct my investigations from this office. The risk falls to Archie, Saul, Fred, and Ori. They accept it as part of their employment." "Thanks for volunteering me," I said. Kramer moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing. Thatcher's wife, Naomi, lives in White Plains. She wouldn't talk to our detectives after the official suicide ruling came down, said she'd been advised to accept the settlement and move on, but maybe she'll talk to you off the record. I'll pay her a visit tomorrow," I said. "Watch your back." Kramer gave the dogs a final look. Mars had moved to the office door as the inspector prepared to leave, a courtesy escort that was both polite and subtly intimidating, and headed out. When the front door closed, Wolfe picked up his book, discovered he'd lost his place, and set it down with a grunt of displeasure. "Archie, tomorrow you will visit Mrs. Thatcher. You will also visit the glass fortress. Take the key card, see what level 72 contains. But first," he fixed me with a stare, "you will ensure that our security is adequate. Check the bulletproof glass, test the new door reinforcements, verify the alarm system." Planning for a siege? Planning for reality. Someone fired a gun on our sidewalk. The next bullet might be aimed at this window, or at you when you leave tomorrow morning. I will not have my employees murdered because I underestimated my opposition. He pushed himself up from his chair. "I'm going to the plant rooms. The phalaenopsis need attention, and I need to think. We will convene at 8 a.m. with Saul, Fred, and Ori. Good night." He left, Caesar padding behind him. The other dogs remained in the office, forming their evening positions. Mars by the door, Apollo near the front window, Minerva between the office and the hall, Diana watching the garden. Their presence was both comforting and unsettling. They knew something was wrong. Animals always know. I sat at my desk and looked at the photograph again. Dr. Quinn Thatcher, falling past walls of glass toward concrete 62 floors below, his face frozen in terminal terror. Someone had pushed him. Someone had photographed it. And someone had murdered the photographer to keep the secret. Now that secret sat on Nero Wolfe's desk, and a dead man's blood stained the sidewalk outside our gate. I locked the photograph, note and keycard in my desk drawer, checked all the windows and doors, everything secure, everything reinforced, and headed upstairs to my room on the 3rd floor. Tomorrow we'd enter the glass fortress. Tonight I'd try to sleep in a brownstone that had just become a target. Outside my window, the city hummed with its usual nocturnal symphony, distant sirens, car horns, the rumble of the subway beneath the streets. Somewhere out there, Charles Vannick sat in his tower of glass and steel, surrounded by his secrets and his money and his lawyers. He didn't know it yet, but Nero Wolfe had just declared war. And when Nero Wolfe went to war, he didn't lose. I hoped. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn clarity that makes New York seem almost innocent, a meteorological lie, if ever there was one. I came downstairs at 7:30 to find Fritz Brenner, our chef and household guardian, preparing breakfast in the kitchen. The smell of fresh coffee and his incomparable bacon made the world seem temporarily sane. Mars and Apollo were in the kitchen with him. Fritz had won their hearts years ago through the strategic application of prime beef scraps, while Caesar, as always, had followed Wolfe upstairs to the plant rooms for his morning orchid inspection. Minerva was in the office, watching the front street through the window. Diana was making a slow circuit of the 1st floor, her routine patrol that said she'd designated herself our early warning system. "Good morning, Archie," Fritz said, pouring coffee into my preferred mug. "Mr. Wolfe has instructed me to prepare breakfast for 6. Saul, Fred, and Ori are expected at 8. That's the plan. Though given last night's excitement, I wouldn't be surprised if they arrived early and heavily armed. Fritz's expression darkened. I heard the shot, and I saw the police on our sidewalk. Someone died there. Someone did. And someone else wants us to find out why. I took my coffee to the office and sat at my desk, reviewing my mental checklist for the day. First, visit Naomi Thatcher in White Plains. Second, infiltrate the glass fortress using the mysterious key card. Third, avoid getting shot. That last one was probably the most important. Saul Panzer arrived at 7:45, which was early even for him. Saul was the best freelance investigator in New York, possibly in the country, and looked like absolutely nobody's idea of a detective. He was short, wiry, with a face that suggested a troubled accountant. But behind those mild eyes was a mind that could track a butterfly through a hurricane and remember which flowers it had visited. He came into the office, nodded to me, gave Minerva a brief scratch behind the ears. She tolerated this from exactly 3 people, Wolfe, Fritz and Saul, and said, "I heard about the shooting. Are we at war?" "Apparently. Coffee? Please." Fred Durkin arrived next, at 7:52. Fred was built like a fire hydrant with a kind heart, and the dogged persistence of a man who'd rather be hit by a truck than give up on an assignment. He'd worked for Wolfe for years, and his loyalty was absolute. "Morning, Archie. Heard you had excitement last night." He spotted the dogs. "The whole pack's on duty? Must be serious." "Serious enough." Wolfe wants everyone briefed by 8. Ori Cather arrived last, at 7:59, cutting it closer than his usual style suggested. Ori was younger than Saul or Fred, with movie-star looks and an ego to match. He was good at his job when he remembered the job was more important than his reflection. But I'd never entirely trusted him. Neither had the dogs. Diana in particular kept her distance when he entered the room, and Mars watched him with the expression of a bouncer evaluating a suspicious patron. At precisely 8 o'clock, Wolfe entered the office. Caesar walked beside him, and the other 4 dogs immediately repositioned themselves into what I'd come to think of as their meeting formation. Caesar near Wolfe, Mars by the office door, Apollo and Diana flanking the windows, Minerva where she could watch both the hall and the gathered humans. Wolfe settled into his chair, took a moment to arrange himself comfortably, and surveyed his assembled troops. "Gentlemen, we have been invaded." He proceeded to lay out the situation with his usual precision: the delivered photograph, the murdered photographer, the implied threat, and Inspector Kramer's information about Dr. Quinn Thatcher and Charles Vannick. When he finished, Saul was frowning, Fred was cracking his knuckles, and Ori looked like he'd just been offered a starring role in a dangerous movie. "Our objective," Wolfe continued, "is to determine the truth behind Dr. Thatcher's death and expose whoever is responsible. Inspector Kramer will handle the legal prosecution. We are concerned solely with facts. Archie will investigate today. Saul, I want you to research Charles Vannick, his business empire, his associates, his enemies. Use your contacts, but be discreet. Fred, locate and interview anyone who worked with Dr. Thatcher. Friends, colleagues, anyone who might provide insight into his final weeks. Ori, you will maintain surveillance on Vannick Tower. I want to know who enters and exits, particularly anyone in the executive suite." "From the street?" Ori asked. "Unless you can grow wings, yes. Find a vantage point. Be invisible. Take photographs if the opportunity arises." I looked at Wolfe. "You're sending me to White Plains and into the Glass Fortress. That's 2 field operations in 1 day. It is 9 hours of daylight, Archie. I'm confident you can manage both." "Your confidence is touching. What will you be doing while we risk our necks?" "Thinking," Wolfe said, "which is considerably more difficult than running around the city asking questions." Saul smiled, a rare expression. "When do we start?" "Immediately. Report back here at 6 p.m. We'll have dinner at 7:30. Fritz is preparing duck, and review our findings." Wolfe paused. "Gentlemen, I will add one caution. We are investigating a man with substantial resources and no apparent conscience. He has already killed twice that we know of. Be careful, be smart, and if you sense danger, retreat. No investigation is worth dying for." Coming from Nero Wolfe, who considered leaving the brownstone to be only slightly less traumatic than personal injury, this was practically a tearful goodbye. We dispersed. Saul headed for his network of contacts. Fred went to track down Thatcher's colleagues. Ori grabbed his camera and left to find a surveillance position near Vannick Tower, and I collected the Heron sedan from the garage and pointed it toward White Plains. Mars walked me to the door, his version of a protective escort, and watched from the front steps as I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I could see him standing there, sentinel-like, until I turned the corner. White Plains was a 40-minute drive north, and I used the time to organize my approach. Naomi Thatcher was a widow whose husband had supposedly committed suicide, who'd been pressured to accept a settlement and stay quiet, and who'd refused to talk to the police. Getting her to open up to a private investigator would require either exceptional charm or exceptional luck. I had some of the former and usually ran short on the latter. The Thatcher house was a modest colonial on a tree-lined street. The kind of neighborhood where people mowed their lawns on Saturday and knew their neighbors' names. I parked across the street and observed for 5 minutes. No obvious surveillance, no suspicious vehicles, no indication that anyone else was watching the widow. I rang the doorbell at 9:43. The woman who answered was in her late 30s, with dark hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail and eyes that had recently become well acquainted with grief. She wore jeans and a sweater, and her expression when she saw me was pure exhaustion. "Mrs. Thatcher, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe, a private investigator in Manhattan. I'd like to talk to you about your husband." "No." She started to close the door. I put my hand on the frame gently. "I know the police say your husband killed himself. I know Vannick's lawyers paid you to accept that and stay quiet. And I know it's a lie." She froze. "Dr. Thatcher was murdered," I continued. "Someone pushed him from that window. We have evidence, photographic evidence, and last night the photographer who captured that image was killed outside our office. Someone is trying very hard to bury the truth. I'm trying to dig it up. You can help." She stared at me for a long moment. Then, "Do you have children, Mr. Goodwin?" "No." "Neither do we. Quinn wanted them. I did too. But he said we should wait until his project was finished. Until he could—" She stopped, her voice breaking. "He worked 70-hour weeks. He came home exhausted. And then one day, he came home terrified. He said he'd discovered something wrong, something that shouldn't exist." "What was it?" "He wouldn't tell me. He said it was classified, that he could go to prison just for mentioning it. But he said he couldn't keep working on it. He tried to quit. They wouldn't let him." She stepped back from the door. "You'd better come in." Her living room was neat but impersonal, as if she'd stopped caring about decoration around the time her husband stopped coming home alive. She offered me coffee. I accepted. When we were both seated, she continued. "Quinn was a good man. Brilliant. He believed in his work, believed he was helping protect the country. He worked on satellite communications, encryption systems, things I didn't understand. But 3 months ago, everything changed." "How?" "He got promoted. They moved him to level 72, the classified research floor. He signed new security agreements, got a higher clearance. He was excited at first. Then, she looked at her coffee. Then he stopped sleeping. He'd wake up at 3 in the morning and just stare at the ceiling. When I asked what was wrong, he'd say nothing. But it wasn't nothing. It was something terrible." "Did he give you any specifics?" 2 weeks before he died, he came home and said he was going to quit. I asked why. He said, "Because I thought I was building a shield, but they're building a sword." That's all he'd say. The next day, he submitted his resignation to Charles Vannick personally. Vannick called him into his office, kept him there for 3 hours. When Quinn came home, he looked, she searched for the word, defeated. He said Vannick had refused his resignation, said his knowledge was too valuable, his work too critical. They offered him a $100,000 bonus to stay. He refused. Then they threatened him. Threatened how? They said if he quit, they'd prosecute him under the Espionage Act. They said his knowledge of classified projects made him a security risk. They'd make sure he never worked again, would destroy his reputation, his career, everything. And they said, she set down her coffee cup with shaking hands. They said accidents happen to people who break their security agreements. He told you this? The night before he died, he was drinking. Quinn almost never drank, and he said, if something happens to me, don't believe them. Don't believe it was suicide or an accident. They'll make it look natural, but it won't be. I thought he was being paranoid. I thought the stress was making him imagine things. Tears streaked her face. The next afternoon, they called to tell me my husband had jumped out a window. Suicide. Corporate stress. I knew immediately it was a lie. I gave her a moment to compose herself. Outside, a dog barked. Some neighbor's pet, oblivious to human tragedy. What happened after they told you? Vannick's lawyers arrived at my house within 2 hours. 2 hours, Mr. Goodwin. My husband was barely cold, and they were here with papers, a settlement offer. $2 million in exchange for my silence and my agreement not to pursue any investigation or legal action. They said if I refused, they'd paint Quinn as mentally unstable, would leak stories about depression, about paranoia. They'd destroy his reputation and leave me with nothing. But you took the settlement. I took the money. I didn't take the silence. She stood and walked to a bookshelf, retrieved a small object, and handed it to me. It was a USB flash drive. Quinn gave this to me the morning he died. He said if anything happened to him, I should give it to someone I trusted, someone outside Vannick's reach. But I don't know who to trust anymore. The police won't help. The lawyers warned me that going public would violate the settlement agreement. I've been sitting here for 3 days, terrified and alone, with this drive burning a hole in my conscience. I looked at the drive. It was small, innocuous, the kind you could buy at any electronics store. But if it contained what I suspected, it was worth killing for. What's on it? I don't know. It's encrypted. Quinn said, only someone with the right kind of knowledge could access it. Someone who understood what he was working on. She sat back down. Mr. Goodwin, I want the truth. I want the world to know my husband didn't kill himself. And I want whoever pushed him out that window to pay for it. Can Nero Wolfe do that? If anyone can, he can. But I need to be honest with you, Mrs. Thatcher. This is dangerous. If you give me this drive, if you help us, Vannick's people will know. They'll come after you. Let them. I'm already dead inside. The only thing keeping me going is the thought that Quinn's death might mean something, that the truth might matter. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Take the drive, find out what's on it, and make them pay. I pocketed the drive. I'll need access to Quinn's files, anything he kept at home. Notes, documents, anything that might help us understand what he was working on. His study is upstairs. He kept everything locked, but I have the keys. Take whatever you need. I spent 90 minutes in Quinn Thatcher's study, a small room that smelled of old books and recent grief. His desk was covered with physics journals, technical manuals, and handwritten notes that might as well have been Sanskrit for all I could decipher. But I'm good at pattern recognition, and one pattern emerged clearly. Dr. Thatcher had been obsessed with something called quantum entanglement encryption. I photographed everything with my pocket camera, collected a stack of his most recent notes, and found one more thing hidden in a hollowed-out book on his shelf. A visitor's badge for Vannick Tower, level 72, dated 2 weeks before his death. Written on the back in Thatcher's handwriting, Omega Protocol, not what they said. Omega. The Greek letter on the glass shard Wolfe had mentioned in his scenario brief. A connection. I pocketed the badge and headed back downstairs. Naomi Thatcher was waiting in the living room, looking smaller than she had an hour ago. Thank you, I said. This will help. Will it be enough? I don't know, but it's more than we had this morning. I paused at the door. Mrs. Thatcher, I meant what I said about danger. If anyone comes asking questions, anyone, call this number immediately. I handed her a card with the Brownstone's phone number. Day or night, someone will answer. Will you catch them? We'll catch them. And when we do, I promise you'll be the first to know. I left her standing in her doorway, a widow holding on to hope like a lifeline. The drive back to Manhattan took 50 minutes through midday traffic. I used the time to think about quantum entanglement encryption, glass fortresses, and men who fell from windows because they knew too much. By the time I pulled into the Brownstones' garage, I'd developed a theory. It wasn't complete, and it relied on several assumptions I couldn't yet prove, but it felt right. Dr. Quinn Thatcher had discovered that his encryption research was being weaponized in a way that violated its intended purpose. He'd tried to quit, they'd killed him, and now they were cleaning up witnesses. The question was, what exactly was the Omega Protocol, and why was it worth multiple murders? I'd find out this afternoon when I walked into the glass fortress with Dr. Thatcher's keycard and whatever remained of my survival instinct. I arrived back at the Brownstone at 1:15, which gave me enough time for lunch. Fritz had prepared one of his magnificent omelettes and a briefing with Wolfe before heading to Vannick Tower. Wolfe was in the dining room, consuming his omelette with the focused intensity he brought to all culinary experiences. Caesar sat beside his chair, dignified and patient. I deposited the USB drive, the visitor's badge, and my stack of photographed documents on the table. Mrs. Thatcher was cooperative, I said, sitting down to my own omelette. Her husband was terrified before he died, tried to quit. Vannick threatened him with prosecution and worse. The night before he fell, he told his wife that if something happened, it wouldn't be suicide. He gave her this encrypted drive, said it contained evidence, but she'd need someone with technical expertise to access it. And I found this. I handed him the visitor's badge. Omega Protocol. Sound familiar? Wolfe studied the badge. Omega, the last letter of the Greek alphabet. In mathematics, it represents the ultimate limit, the final bound. In colloquial use, it suggests finality, endings. He set the badge down. What is Dr. Thatcher's field of expertise? Quantum physics. Specifically, quantum entanglement encryption. According to his wife, he thought he was building a shield, defensive technology, but he discovered they were building a sword, a weapon. That's my guess. Some kind of encryption technology that can be used offensively, something that shouldn't exist. I took a bite of omelette. It was perfect as always. I'm heading to Vannick Tower this afternoon. The key card we received should give me access to level 72. I'll see what I can find. Wolfe's expression darkened. Archie, if Dr. Thatcher was murdered for what he knew, and if Mr. Lassiter was murdered for what he photographed, then you are walking into considerable danger. I'm aware. Are you? Because I have no interest in attending your funeral. That makes two of us. But we need to know what's on level 72, and I'm the only one with a keycard. I finished my omelette. I'll be careful. I'll have my phone, and if anything feels wrong, I'll abort. See that you do. Your recklessness may be amusing most of the time, Archie, but today it could be fatal. I'm touched by your concern. I'm concerned about my own convenience. Training a replacement would be tedious, but his eyes belied his words. Nero Wolfe was many things, but he wasn't heartless. I finished lunch, changed into my best business suit. If I was infiltrating a corporate fortress, I might as well look the part, and collected the keycard, the visitor's badge and my pocket camera. Mars walked me to the front door, his dark eyes serious. Apollo joined him, both dogs flanking me like an honor guard. I'll be back by 6, I told them. Don't let Wolfe eat all the duck. Mars made a sound that might have been canine laughter. I drove the Heron to Midtown, parked in a lot on 49th Street, and walked 2 blocks to 6th Avenue. The glass fortress, officially Vannick Tower, rose 83 stories above the Manhattan skyline, a monument to architectural ambition and corporate ego. Its walls were entirely glass, floor-to-ceiling windows that reflected the city back at itself. It was beautiful in the way a shark is beautiful, sleek, powerful, and predatory. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and steel, with security stations that looked borrowed from airport customs. Men in dark suits wearing discreet earpieces watched everyone who entered. Corporate security, ex-military, if I was any judge. They moved with the economy of people trained to kill efficiently. I approached the main security desk with the confidence of someone who belonged there. The guard nameplate, R. Kelso, looked up from his monitor. Can I help you? Archie Goodwin, consulting with Dr. Halyard, on level 7. I showed him the keycard and the visitor's badge. I'm expected at 2 o'clock. Kelso studied the keycard, swiped it through his reader, and frowned. This shows clearance for level 72, but I don't have you on the visitor log for today. Dr. Halyard's assistant must have forgotten to add me. You know how it is. Busy day, last-minute consultations. Can you call up and confirm? He picked up his phone, hesitated, then set it down. Level 72 doesn't take calls from the desk. Security protocol. He studied me for another long moment. The key card is valid. I'll have to log you manually. ID, please. I handed him my driver's license. He typed information into his computer, printed a temporary badge, and slid it across the counter. Elevators are on your right. You'll need to swipe your key card at the elevator bank to access 72. Keep your badge visible at all times. If you're challenged by security, cooperate immediately. Of course, thank you. I walked to the elevator bank, a cluster of 8 elevators serving different floor ranges. The one marked 7083, authorized personnel only, required a keycard swipe. I used Dr. Thatcher's card, and the panel lit green. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. The doors closed, and I began rising toward level 72 and whatever secrets had been worth killing for. The elevator was smooth, silent, and fast, the kind that makes your stomach drop and your ears pop. It took 45 seconds to reach level 72. When the doors opened, I stepped into a hallway that looked like something from a science fiction film, white walls, LED lighting, and doors with biometric security panels. A woman was waiting for me. She was perhaps 45, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob, wearing a charcoal suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her smile was professional, and completely artificial. Mr. Goodwin, I'm Jacqueline Merritt, Director of Research Security. Mr. Kelso called up to alert us of your arrival. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We have no record of your consultation with Dr. Halyard. That's strange. His assistant confirmed it yesterday. Dr. Halyard doesn't have an assistant, and you're not on our cleared visitor list. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes were cold. I'm going to have to ask you to return to the lobby. Of course, my apologies for the confusion. I made no move to return to the elevator. Sometimes the best defense is offense. Before I go, though, maybe you can help me. I'm trying to reach Dr. Quinn Thatcher. He was supposed to meet me downtown yesterday, but he never showed. Is he here today? The smile vanished. Dr. Thatcher no longer works here. Since when? That's confidential information, and I'm done answering questions. She gestured to two security guards who'd materialized from a side corridor. They were large, professional, and armed. These gentlemen will escort you out. No need for an escort. I can find my own way. I turned toward the elevator. Actually, you can't. Jacqueline Merritt held out her hand. The keycard, please. What keycard? The one you used to access this floor. It belongs to Dr. Thatcher, and it should have been deactivated 3 days ago. I'll need it back, along with that visitor badge. I'd been made. The question was whether I could learn anything before they threw me out or arrested me. All right, I handed her the keycard and badge. But maybe you can tell me one thing. What's the Omega Protocol? Her face went white. Not pale. White, like someone had injected ice water into her veins. Who told you that name? Dr. Thatcher. Before he fell from your window, or was pushed. I'm still working out which. One of the security guards stepped forward, his hand moving toward his holstered weapon. But Jacqueline Merritt held up her hand. Stop. She stared at me. You're not a consultant. You're a private investigator. Guilty. Working for whom? The truth. It's a demanding client. Get him out of here, she said to the guards. Escort him to the street. If he returns, arrest him for trespassing. The guards took my arms, politely but firmly. They walked me back to the elevator, rode down with me in silence, and marched me through the lobby. Every eye in the building watched. The guard at the desk, Kelso, looked disappointed, as if he'd hoped for more excitement. They deposited me on the sidewalk at 2:37, and one of them said, "Don't come back." Duly noted. They returned to the building. I walked half a block, turned the corner, and leaned against a wall to catch my breath and organize my thoughts. I'd learned 3 things. First, Level 72 was serious about security. Second, Jacqueline Merritt knew about the Omega Protocol and was terrified that I knew. Third, I was now officially on their radar. That last point was problematic. I pulled out my phone to call Wolfe, and that's when I noticed the man watching me from across the street. He was in his 30s, athletic build, wearing a leather jacket and the kind of dead-eyed expression that suggested either extreme boredom or professional surveillance. When our eyes met, he didn't look away, he just smiled, and then he started walking toward me. I've been in enough dangerous situations to recognize when someone is about to cause me harm. The man crossing the street toward me had that quality, the loose, confident stride of someone who'd hurt people before and expected to hurt me now. I had 3 options: run, fight, or talk. I chose talk, primarily because running in wingtip shoes is undignified, and fighting someone who probably had 40 pounds of muscle on me seemed tactically unsound. He stopped 3 feet away. You're Archie Goodwin. Depends on who's asking. Someone who's been paid to ask you nicely to stop investigating Vannick Tower. And if I don't, then I'm paid to ask less nicely. He cracked his knuckles, a cliché, but an effective one. You've got a choice. Walk away from this case. Forget about Dr. Thatcher. Forget about the photograph, and nobody gets hurt. Keep digging. And, he shrugged, accidents happen. Like Dr. Thatcher's accident? Exactly like that. And Bernard Lassiter's accident outside my office last night? His smile widened. That was me. Professional work, wasn't it? One shot, clean exit. The man never felt a thing. You just confessed to murder. To you? And you're not wired, not recording, and there are no witnesses. Your word against mine, and I've got a dozen alibi witnesses who'll swear I was in Brooklyn all night." He stepped closer. "Here's how this works, Goodwin. You walk away right now. You tell your boss Nero Wolfe, right, that this case is closed. You don't investigate, you don't ask questions, you don't talk to the police. You forget any of this ever happened. And if I don't, then you end up like Lassiter. Or maybe we go after your boss. Big fat guy, right? Lives in a brownstone on West 35th Street. Has a bunch of dogs. Would be a shame if something happened to him. Or to that chef. What's his name? Fritz? Old man like that? A fall down the stairs could be fatal." That's when I stopped being cautious and started being angry. "Let me tell you something," I said, keeping my voice level. "Nero Wolfe doesn't scare easily, and threatening him is the fastest way to guarantee he'll dedicate every resource he has to destroying you and whoever hired you. You want to threaten me? Fine, I signed up for that. But you mention Fritz or those dogs again, and I promise you'll regret it." He laughed, tough talk from a guy who's about to get his face rearranged. He swung at me, a right hook that would have broken my jaw if it had connected. But I'd been expecting it, and I ducked, letting his momentum carry him past me. I kicked the back of his knee, and he stumbled. Before he could recover, I had my pocket camera out and snapped 3 quick photos of his face. "Smile for Inspector Kramer," I said. "I'm sure he'll enjoy matching your prints to the shell casing. Oh wait, you used a revolver. Smart, but I bet you made a mistake somewhere. Professionals always do." He charged me, and this time I didn't dodge fast enough. His fist caught my shoulder, sending me spinning into the wall. Pain exploded through my arm. He followed up with a jab that I barely blocked, and then he had his hand inside his jacket, reaching for what was almost certainly a gun. That's when someone shouted, "Hey, police!" We both turned. A uniformed officer was running toward us from down the block, his hand on his holstered weapon. My assailant made a split-second decision, cursed, and ran. He sprinted north toward 50th Street and disappeared around the corner before the officer could close the distance. The cop reached me, breathing hard. "Are you all right?" "Bruised, but functional. Thanks for the timely intervention." I saw him throw a punch. "You want to file a report?" I thought about it. On one hand, creating a paper trail would document the threat. On the other hand, Vannick's lawyers would bury any complaint under a mountain of legal motions, and I'd spend weeks in depositions. "No," I said, "just a disagreement." He left. "I'm fine. No harm done." The officer looked skeptical, but nodded. "If you change your mind, the precinct's on 54th Street. "I'll keep that in mind. Thank you, officer." He gave me one more doubtful look and continued his patrol. I straightened my tie, checked for broken bones. None. Just a spectacular bruise forming on my shoulder, and headed back to where I'd parked the Heron. My phone rang as I reached the car. "Wolfe. Archie. Report. I'm alive, which is more than can be said for my dignity. I got into Vannick Tower, made it to level 72, got kicked out by their security director, and then got jumped by the man who killed Bernard Lassiter. He confessed, threatened you and Fritz, and tried to rearrange my face. I got photos before a cop scared him off. So overall, a productive afternoon." Silence on the line. "Then, come home. Immediately. And check that you're not being followed." Already on it. I drove back to the brownstone via a circuitous route that would have made a spy novelist proud, checking my mirrors every 30 seconds. No one followed me. Either they'd decided I wasn't worth the effort, or they were better at surveillance than I was at detecting it. Neither option was comforting. I arrived at the brownstone at 3:45. Minerva met me at the door, her nose working overtime as she checked me for injuries. Diana joined her, both dogs following me to the office where Wolfe sat behind his desk, glowering. "You were threatened," he said. "Thoroughly. But I got information in return." I handed him my camera. "That's the man who killed Lassiter. He admitted it, and he mentioned the Omega Protocol, or rather, his employers don't want anyone investigating it, which suggests we're on the right track." "What happened on level 72? I described my encounter with Jacqueline Merritt, her reaction to the Omega Protocol, and the heightened security throughout the floor. Whatever they're working on up there, it's serious enough to kill for. Dr. Thatcher knew about it, tried to quit, and died for his knowledge. Now they're trying to scare us off before we find out what he knew." Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced across his stomach. Caesar, sitting beside him, watched me with dark, knowing eyes. Did the man who threatened you strike you as intelligent? Professional, experienced, not particularly bright. Then he's a tool, not the craftsman. Someone hired him to frighten us, someone with resources and no conscience. He opened his center drawer and removed the USB drive I'd brought from Mrs. Thatcher. This contains Dr. Thatcher's evidence, encrypted. We'll need an expert to access it. Do you know someone? I know several someones. The question is which one we can trust. He thought for a moment. Call Mr. Hewitt at Columbia. If he can't decrypt it himself, he'll know who can. Professor Julian Hewitt taught computer science and cryptography at Columbia. He'd consulted for Wolfe twice before, both times on cases involving electronic security. He was brilliant, discreet, and expensive. I called him. He agreed to meet us at the brownstone at 5 o'clock, which gave me time to develop the photographs from my camera and type up my notes from the day's adventures. Saul, Fred, and Ori all returned by 5:30, each with their own findings. We gathered in the office for what Wolfe called an exchange of intelligence, which really meant everyone talked while he listened and thought. Saul went first. Charles Vannick, age 56, born in Philadelphia, undergraduate degree from MIT, MBA from Wharton, built his first fortune selling telecommunications equipment in the 90s, then pivoted to defense contracting after 9/11. His company, Vannick Consolidated, holds contracts with the Department of Defense, the NSA, and several classified agencies I couldn't identify. He's worth approximately $4 billion. That's a conservative estimate. He owns properties in Manhattan, Palm Beach, London, and Geneva. He's been married 3 times, divorced twice, currently single. No children, no criminal record, not even a speeding ticket. Associates? Wolfe asked. Vannick keeps a small inner circle. His chief operating officer is Desmond Archer, former Army intelligence, recruited by Vannick 8 years ago. His head of research is Dr. Lillian Cross, physicist, MIT doctorate, 20 years with Vannick. And his head of security is Marcus Brennan, ex-CIA, specializes in corporate counterintelligence. These 3 know everything Vannick knows. If there's a conspiracy, they're part of it. Fred reported next. I talked to 3 of Dr. Thatcher's former colleagues. They all said the same thing. Thatcher was brilliant, dedicated, and increasingly paranoid toward the end. One of them, Dr. Isabel Haynes, said Thatcher tried to talk to her about his concerns 2 weeks before he died. She said he seemed terrified, but wouldn't give specifics. She reported his behavior to management, thinking he might be having a breakdown. A week later, he was dead. Did she feel guilty about reporting him? I asked. Very. She thinks her report got him killed. Ori was last. I surveilled Vannick Tower from a coffee shop across the street. Lots of foot traffic, lots of deliveries, nothing unusual until 4 p.m. That's when a convoy of 3 black SUVs pulled up to the executive entrance. 6 men in suits, private security, escorted a man into the building. I got photos. He handed Wolfe a set of prints. That's Charles Vannick himself. He doesn't come to the office every day, usually works from his penthouse uptown. But today he came in person, and he looked worried. Wolfe studied the photographs. Charles Vannick was a handsome man. Silver hair, sharp suit, the kind of confidence that comes from having enough money to solve most problems. But in Ori's photos, his expression was tight, his jaw clenched. He knows we're investigating, Wolfe said. His security director told him about Archie's visit. Now he's worried about containment. Professor Hewitt arrived at 5:45, a compact man with wild grey hair and the distracted air of someone perpetually solving equations in his head. Wolfe gave him the USB drive, explained its origin, and asked if he could decrypt it. Hewitt examined the drive, plugged it into his laptop, and spent 10 minutes typing, muttering, and occasionally cursing in what I think was ancient Greek. Finally, he looked up. This is military-grade encryption, AES 256, probably government-issued. I can break it, but it'll take time. Maybe 6 hours, maybe longer. I'll need to run it through my decryption software back at the university. How much time? Wolfe asked. I'll have something for you by tomorrow morning, maybe sooner if I'm lucky. Do it. And Professor, be discreet. The people who encrypted this drive have killed to protect its contents. Hewitt's eyes widened slightly, but he nodded. I'll work in my secure lab. No one will know." After he left, Wolfe looked at each of us in turn. We now have multiple threads: Dr. Thatcher's encrypted evidence, his widow's testimony, Archie's confrontation at Vannick Tower, and the confession from Mr. Lassiter's killer. Inspector Kramer is analyzing the photograph we provided. When Professor Hewitt decrypts the drive, we'll have our proof. The question is, what do we do with it? "Give it to Kramer," Fred said. "Vannick's lawyers will bury it," Saul countered. "We need ironclad evidence, enough to force a prosecution that can't be stopped." "Then we get ironclad evidence," I said. "We have until tomorrow morning. Let's use the time." Wolfe nodded. "Saul, continue researching Vannick's business dealings. Focus on Project Helix, the classified contract Dr. Thatcher worked on. Find out what it actually does. Fred, locate Dr. Lillian Cross. She's Vannick's head of research. She'll know about the Omega Protocol. See if you can persuade her to talk. Ori, maintain surveillance on Vannick Tower. I want to know everyone who enters or leaves tonight. Archie," he paused. "Archie will stay here. Someone has threatened him once today. I won't risk it happening again when he's alone. I can take care of myself." Demonstrably. "But I prefer my employees alive." He pushed himself up from his chair. "Dinner is at 7:30. Until then I'll be in the plant rooms. Caesar, come." Caesar followed him out. The other 4 dogs remained in the office, forming their protective perimeter. They knew something was building. Animals always know. Dinner was excellent. Fritz's duck with cherry sauce, roasted vegetables, and a wine that probably cost more than most people's car payments, but the conversation was tense. We were all waiting for Professor Hewitt's call, waiting for the encrypted drive to reveal its secrets. The call came at 9:17. I answered. "Hewitt?" "It's decrypted." His voice was shaking. "Goodwin, you need to see this. Tonight. Right now." "What is it?" "Something that shouldn't exist. Something that could—" He stopped. "Just get here, and bring Wolfe if he's willing to leave his fortress. Because if what I'm reading is accurate, Dr. Thatcher didn't die for stealing corporate secrets. He died for discovering treason." Getting Nero Wolfe to leave the brownstone was roughly as easy as convincing Caesar to become a cat person. But when Professor Hewitt's call ended, and I relayed his exact words, treason, something shifted in Wolfe's expression. He sat behind his desk, motionless except for the slight movement of his lips that indicated deep thought. The office was quiet. The dogs had settled into their evening positions. Caesar near Wolfe's chair, Mars by the door, Apollo and Diana watching the windows, Minerva monitoring the hallway. They sensed the tension. Finally, Wolfe spoke. "Treason is not a word Professor Hewitt would use lightly. If Dr. Thatcher's evidence suggests treasonous activity, then we're no longer investigating corporate malfeasance. We're investigating a threat to national security. Which means we should turn this over to the FBI," I said, "and watch it disappear into a bureaucratic void, while Vannick's lawyers and political connections shut down the investigation? No." He pushed himself to his feet, a process that always looked like continental drift. "We'll go to Columbia. We'll examine Professor Hewitt's findings, and then we'll decide how to proceed." Saul looked up from his notebook. "You're leaving the brownstone?" "I'm defending my country, Mr. Panzer. Even that justifies mild discomfort." He looked at me. "Archie, call for a car. Make it a sedan with a professional driver. I won't have you distracted by traffic while I'm vulnerable in a vehicle. Saul, Fred, you'll accompany us. Ori, remain here with Fritz. If anyone approaches the brownstone, call me immediately." 20 minutes later, we were in a hired sedan, heading uptown toward Columbia's campus. Wolfe occupied most of the back seat, with Caesar taking up the remaining space and refusing to be left behind. Saul and Fred followed in a second car. I sat in the front passenger seat, watching for surveillance. The driver, a taciturn professional named Kowalski, navigated the evening traffic with the efficiency of someone who'd spent decades studying Manhattan's arterial system. We reached Columbia at 10:15. Professor Hewitt was waiting at his lab in the computer science building, looking like he'd aged 5 years in 3 hours. His grey hair was wild, his eyes bloodshot, and his hands trembled as he let us into the secure laboratory, a windowless room filled with computers, servers, and enough electronic equipment to launch a satellite. "Wolfe! Thank God!" He locked the door behind us. "I've been afraid to call anyone else. What's on this drive? Jesus, Wolfe, this is beyond anything I've seen." "Show me," Wolfe said, settling into the only chair rated for his weight, a reinforced desk chair that creaked ominously. Caesar positioned himself beside the chair, watchful. Hewitt pulled up a file on his largest monitor. Dr. Thatcher's encryption was sophisticated, but he left breadcrumbs hints in the encryption key that suggested he wanted someone to eventually decrypt this. It took my software 4 hours to crack it. When it did, he clicked open a document. "This is the Omega Protocol." The screen filled with text, technical specifications, schematics, and what looked like intelligence briefings. I couldn't understand half of it, but the parts I did understand made my blood cold. Hewitt began explaining, pointing to different sections of the document. Project Helix was sold to the Defense Department as a quantum encryption system for secure satellite communications. The idea was to create unbreakable encryption using quantum entanglement, particles linked at the quantum level that could transmit information instantaneously across any distance. It's theoretical physics at the cutting edge. "I'm familiar with the concept," Wolfe said. "Continue." What Vannick told the Defense Department was true, up to a point. He did build a quantum encryption system. It works brilliantly for secure communications. But he also built something else, something the government doesn't know about, a decryption key. Saul leaned forward. "A back door?" "More than that. The Omega Protocol is a master key that can break any encryption based on quantum entanglement, including the encryption that Vannick sold to the US military. Every secure satellite communication, every classified transmission, every intelligence briefing sent through Vannick's system can be intercepted and decrypted using this protocol." The implications crashed over me like a cold wave. He sold the government an unbreakable encryption system with a master key that only he controls. Exactly. And according to these documents, he's already using it. Vannick Consolidated has been intercepting classified military communications for 8 months. They know troop movements, intelligence operations, diplomatic cables, everything, and they've been selling that information. "To whom?" Wolfe asked quietly. Hewitt clicked to another document. "This is a transaction ledger, encrypted, but I cracked it. Vannick has sold intelligence to 12 different entities, rival defense contractors, foreign governments, private military companies. He's made over $400 million in the past year alone." Fred let out a low whistle. "He's a spy. He built a surveillance system, convinced the government to use it, and then used it to steal their secrets." "Worse than a spy," Wolfe said. "A spy works for a nation. Mr. Vannick works for himself. He's weaponized America's own security infrastructure and turned it into a profit center." He looked at Hewitt. "Dr. Thatcher discovered this?" "According to his notes, yes. He was the lead physicist on the quantum entanglement team. He helped design the system, but he didn't know about the Omega Protocol until 3 months ago, when he was transferred to level 72 and given access to the classified architecture. That's when he realized what Vannick had done. And when he tried to quit, Vannick killed him," I said. Hewitt nodded. "These files include communications between Vannick and his security chief Marcus Brennan. They're explicit. Vannick ordered Thatcher's death, made it look like suicide, paid off the family, and when they realized Thatcher might have left evidence, they started hunting for leaks. That's when they killed your photographer." Wolfe sat in silence, his eyes closed, his massive head slightly tilted. I'd seen this before, his mind working through implications, connections, and consequences at a pace that left normal humans in the dust. Finally, he opened his eyes. "Professor, can you verify this data? Can you prove its authenticity beyond doubt?" "Yes. The encryption keys match Vannick's systems. The communications are digitally signed, traceable to Vannick's servers, and the transaction ledger includes bank account numbers that can be verified. This isn't speculation, Wolfe. It's evidence." "Then we have a decision to make." Wolfe looked at each of us in turn. "If we take this to Inspector Kramer, it will trigger a conventional investigation. Vannick's lawyers will be notified. Evidence will be challenged. The process could take months, during which time Vannick will cover his tracks, destroy records, and potentially flee the country. By the time the legal system catches up, the Omega Protocol could be shut down, and Vannick could be beyond reach." "What's the alternative?" Saul asked. "We force Vannick to confess, publicly, in front of witnesses who can't be silenced or bought." I stared at him. "You want to confront him directly?" "I want to trap him." lure him to a location where he feels secure, present him with evidence he can't deny, and force him to reveal his crimes in the presence of law enforcement and the press. It's theatrical, yes, but it's also effective. It's also dangerous, Fred said. Vannick has killed twice. He won't hesitate to kill again. Then we ensure he can't. We choose the battlefield. We control the confrontation. And we make certain that he has no escape. Wolfe looked at me. Archie, can you arrange for Inspector Kramer to be present at a specific location tomorrow night without telling him why? Probably, but he won't like being manipulated. He'll like the result, and that's all that matters. What location? Saul asked. Wolfe smiled, a rare expression, and never a reassuring one. The Glass Fortress, level 72 to be precise. We'll confront Mr. Vannick in the heart of his empire, with his crimes laid bare and his options eliminated. He'll confess because he'll have no alternative. How do we get him there? I asked. He won't accept an invitation from us. No, but he'll accept one from someone he trusts. Wolfe turned to Professor Hewitt. Do these files include communications with Dr. Lillian Cross, his head of research? Hewitt scrolled through documents. Yes, extensive communications. It looks like, oh, he stopped, his expression darkening. Lillian Cross knew about the Omega Protocol. She helped design it. But according to these emails, she had a crisis of conscience 6 weeks ago. She threatened to expose Vannick unless he shut down the program. He refused. She's been planning to go to the FBI. Then we have our ally, Wolfe said. Find Dr. Cross. Bring her to the brownstone. Tonight if possible. Offer her protection, immunity, and the chance to make things right. If she agrees to help, we'll have our trap. And if she refuses, Fred asked. Then we proceed without her, but I suspect she'll cooperate. People burdened by guilt usually do, especially when offered redemption. We left Columbia at 11:30. Saul immediately began searching for Dr. Lillian Cross's contact information, while Fred called his network to locate her address. By the time we reached the brownstone, we had both. Dr. Cross lived in a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, and her phone number was listed. I called her at midnight. She answered on the third ring, sounding exhausted. Dr. Cross, my name is Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. We need to talk about the Omega Protocol. Silence. Then, who told you that name? Dr. Quinn Thatcher, before he was murdered. Another silence, longer this time. You have evidence? We have everything. Encrypted files, transaction records, communications. We know what Vannick built. We know what he's doing with it. And we know you've been trying to stop him. How? She stopped. You can't call me on this line. They might be monitoring. Then come here, West 35th Street. The brownstone with the bulletproof windows and the Doberman sentries. We'll protect you, and tomorrow we'll end this. I can't. If they realize I've gone to you, they'll kill you, just like they killed Thatcher. You know that, Dr. Cross. You've known it for 6 weeks. That's why you haven't gone to the FBI. You're afraid they'll find out, and you'll end up falling from a window. I softened my voice. We can protect you, and we can stop Vannick, but we need your help. 5 seconds of silence. Then, I'll be there in 40 minutes. She hung up. Dr. Lillian Cross arrived at 12:57 a.m., driving a modest Honda and looking over her shoulder every 10 seconds. She was in her early 50s, with short dark hair streaked with grey and the kind of haunted expression that suggested she hadn't slept properly in weeks. Mars met her at the door, his way of evaluating threats. She passed his inspection, barely. I led her to the office, where Wolfe waited behind his desk, Caesar at his side. Dr. Cross, thank you for coming. She sat in the red leather chair, her hands trembling. You said you have evidence. Show me. Wolfe gestured to me. I produced the USB drive and explained its contents. Dr. Thatcher's encrypted files, the Omega Protocol, the transaction ledger. As I spoke, her face went from pale to grey. Quinn kept records, she whispered. I told him not to. I said it would get him killed. He said someone needed to know the truth. He was right. She looked at Wolfe. What do you want from me? Your testimony, your expertise, and your help in trapping Charles Vannick. He'll kill me. Not if we do this correctly. Tomorrow night, you'll invite Vannick to meet you at level 72. You'll tell him you found evidence that Dr. Thatcher left behind, that you need his help securing it before it falls into the wrong hands. He'll come because he trusts you, and because he's desperate to contain the damage. When he arrives, we'll be waiting, with Inspector Kramer, with evidence, and with enough witnesses to make certain he can't escape. What if he doesn't come alone? He won't. He'll bring his security chief, Marcus Brennan, possibly others, but he'll come because his survival depends on recovering that evidence. And when he's there, when he's surrounded, we'll present him with two choices: confess publicly or face prosecution, knowing that his crimes have already been exposed to law enforcement and the media. He'll never confess. He will if the alternative is worse, and I'll make certain it is. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Dr. Cross, you helped build the Omega Protocol. You carry that burden, but you can also help destroy it. Give testimony, help us trap Vannick, and you'll have immunity. The government will want you to rebuild their compromised systems. You'll have a chance to undo the damage. She stared at her hands. I never wanted this. When Vannick first proposed the project, he said it was defensive, a way to protect American communications from foreign adversaries. I believed him. By the time I realized what he'd actually built, it was too late. I was complicit. Then stop being complicit. Help us. She looked up, meeting Wolfe's eyes. If I do this, if I help you trap him, I need your word that you'll protect me. Not just tonight. After. Vannick has connections, resources. Even if he's arrested, his people might come after me. You have my word, and you have these. Wolfe gestured to the dogs positioned throughout the office. Until this is finished, you'll stay here, under this roof, behind bulletproof windows, with guards who never sleep. No one will reach you. She looked at Caesar, Mars, Apollo, Minerva, and Diana. You trust dogs to protect me. I trust these dogs more than most humans, and they've never disappointed me. Dr. Cross took a deep breath. All right, I'll help you, but we do this my way. I know Vannick. I know how he thinks. If we're going to trap him, we need to be smart. I'm listening, Wolfe said. We spent the next 2 hours planning. Dr. Cross outlined Vannick's psychology, his arrogance, his paranoia, his absolute confidence in his ability to outthink everyone around him. She explained the layout of Level 72, the security protocols, and the one time of day when Vannick felt most secure, late evening, after his staff had left and before the night security shift began, full patrols. He does his most sensitive work between 9 and 11 p.m., she said. That's when he reviews classified intelligence, makes his deals, communicates with buyers. He believes the building is most secure at that time because it's mostly empty. If I tell him to meet me at 9:30, he'll come. What reason will you give? I asked. I'll tell him I found something in Quinn's old workstation, a hidden drive that Quinn forgot to wipe. I'll say it contains notes about the Omega Protocol, that I need Vannick's help deciding what to do with it. He'll come because he'll be terrified that evidence exists and desperate to contain it. Wolfe nodded. And when he arrives? We'll need to be in position before he gets there. Level 72 requires keycard access. I have one. I can let you in. But we'll need to move quickly. Vannick will bring Marcus Brennan, probably armed. If he suspects a trap, he'll abort. Then we won't give him reason to suspect. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, contact Inspector Kramer. Tell him to be at Vannick Tower at 9:15 tomorrow night. Level 72. Tell him to bring backup, but to remain out of sight until I signal. He won't like it, but he'll agree. What about the press? Saul asked. You mentioned witnesses. Mr. Brenner at the Gazette. He's reliable, discreet, and ambitious. If we offer him an exclusive on corporate treason, defense contract fraud, and murder, he'll be there with a recorder and a photographer. Dr. Cross frowned. If the press is there, Vannick will know it's a setup the moment he arrives. Not if they're hidden. Level 72 has offices, storage rooms, observation areas. We'll position everyone before Vannick arrives. When the trap is sprung, they'll emerge. But not before. Wolfe looked at each of us. This is dangerous. Vannick is a killer. Brennan is a professional. If something goes wrong, people could die. Anyone who wants to withdraw has my permission. No one moved. Good. Then we proceed. Dr. Cross, you'll stay here tonight. Fritz will prepare a guest room. Tomorrow you'll call Vannick at 6 p.m., early enough to give him time to arrange his schedule. late enough that he can't plan an elaborate countermeasure. The rest of us will prepare. What about me? Dr. Cross asked. When Vannick arrives, where will I be? Visible, in your office, or whatever workspace you normally use. You'll act naturally, concerned about the evidence you found, uncertain what to do. When Vannick arrives, you'll lead him to the confrontation, and then you'll step aside while I extract his confession. You'll be there, in person. I will. This is not a case I can solve from my office. The glass fortress awaits, Dr. Cross, and tomorrow night we'll shatter it. The rest of Friday passed in a blur of preparation. Saul researched the building's security systems and identified blind spots in the cameras. Fred coordinated with Inspector Kramer, who agreed to participate despite his obvious misgivings. Ori maintained surveillance on Vannick Tower, tracking the routines of security personnel and noting shift changes. I spent the afternoon securing our reporter witness. Jack Brenner of the Gazette was a grizzled investigative journalist with 30 years' experience and a nose for corruption. When I outlined the story, treason, defense contract fraud, 2 murders, his eyes lit up like a kid who'd just discovered the treehouse had electricity. "You're sure about this?" he asked. "Because if you're wrong, my career ends in a defamation lawsuit." Nero Wolfe is sure. That should be sufficient. It is. I'll be there, with a photographer, a recorder, and a lawyer on speed dial. At 6 p.m., Dr. Cross made the call to Charles Vannick. She put it on speaker so we could all hear. Wolfe sat behind his desk, listening with his eyes closed. The dogs were arrayed throughout the office, alert and watchful. The phone rang 3 times before Vannick answered. "Lillian, this is unexpected." His voice was smooth, cultured, with the kind of confidence that came from owning a billion-dollar company and believing he was smarter than everyone else. "Charles, we need to talk. I found something in Quinn's old workstation, a hidden drive he left behind. It contains files about our project." A pause. What kind of files? Technical specifications, communications, records. She injected fear into her voice. Not difficult, given that she actually was terrified. "Charles, if anyone sees this, if it gets to the authorities..." "Where are you?" "At the office, level 72. I didn't know what else to do. I thought about deleting it, but what if there are copies? What if..." "Stop. Don't do anything. I'm coming there. Tonight. Can you stay until 9:30? "Yes, but Charles, I'm scared. If Quinn left evidence, if someone finds out what we..." "No one will find out. I'll handle this. Just wait for me. Don't call anyone else. Don't touch those files. I'll be there at 9:30. "All right. Thank you, Charles." "Lillian." His voice softened. "We're in this together. You know that. I'll protect you. I always have." She hung up and looked at Wolfe with hollow eyes. "He's coming, and he has no idea." "Good. Then we have 3 hours to prepare." Wolfe stood, a production that involved both hands on his desk and an audible grunt of effort. "Gentlemen, we leave for Columbia at 8 p.m. Dr. Cross, you'll travel separately with Saul. I won't risk Vannick's people spotting us together. Inspector Kramer will arrive at 9:15, Mr. Brenner and his photographer at 9:20, and Archie, Saul, Fred and I will be in position by 9. Any questions?" "Just one," I said. "What happens if Vannick refuses to confess?" "Then we present the evidence to Inspector Kramer and let the legal system proceed. But I don't believe it will come to that. When Charles Vannick sees his empire crumbling and realizes that his only choices are confession or prosecution with the press watching, he'll choose confession. Men like him always do. Pride demands it. And if he tries to run, he won't make it to the elevator. Inspector Kramer will see to that." Wolfe moved toward the door. "Caesar, come. I need to spend an hour with my orchids before we enter the fray. Clear thinking requires peaceful preparation." At 8 p.m., we loaded into 2 cars. Wolfe, Caesar, Fred and I took the hired sedan. Saul drove Dr. Cross separately. Ori remained at the brownstone with Fritz, tasked with feeding the remaining dogs and monitoring the security systems. The drive to Midtown was quiet. Wolfe sat in the back with Caesar, his eyes closed, presumably running through scenarios and strategies. Fred checked his phone obsessively. I drove, keeping one eye on traffic and the other on potential surveillance. We arrived at Vannick Tower at 8:50. The building's lobby was nearly empty, just security guards and a few late-working employees. Dr. Cross had provided us with visitor badges she'd authorized earlier in the day, listing us as security consultants. The guard at the desk, a different one from yesterday, thankfully, checked our IDs, logged us in and waved us through. The elevator to level 72 felt slower than before, or maybe that was just my nerves. When the doors opened, Dr. Cross was waiting in the hallway. She looked like she might vomit. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered. "You can," Wolfe said firmly, "and you will. You've carried this burden for too long, Dr. Cross. Tonight you set it down." She nodded, not looking convinced, and led us down the corridor. Level 72 was exactly as I remembered. White walls, LED lighting, biometric security doors. But now the hallway was empty, the offices dark. Dr. Cross used her keycard to access a large conference room near the elevator bank. "This is where I told Vannick to meet me. It's central, visible from the security cameras, which he'll expect, and it has adjoining offices where you can hide until it's time." The conference room was corporate sterile, long table, leather chairs, a wall of glass overlooking the Manhattan skyline. The view was spectacular, the city spread out below us like a map of ambition and light. Wolfe looked at it for exactly 3 seconds, then turned away. "Archie, Saul, Fred, take positions in the adjoining offices. Keep the doors unlocked but closed. When I give the signal, I'll say, 'Gentlemen, please join us. Enter immediately.' Dr. Cross, you'll be at this table when Vannick arrives. Natural, calm. Caesar will be with me in the far office. He's trained to remain silent unless commanded otherwise." "What about Kramer?" I asked. "Well, Inspector Kramer will be 1 floor below, in the stairwell. Close enough to intervene, far enough to avoid detection. Mr. Brenner and his photographer will be in the storage room across the hall. Dr. Cross arranged access. Everyone in position by 9:15. Vannick arrives at 9:30. We spring the trap at 9:35. And if something goes wrong, Fred asked, improvise intelligently. I'll handle Vannick. You handle anyone he brings with him. Wolfe looked at Dr. Cross. Are you ready? No, but I'm doing it anyway. That's the definition of courage, Dr. Cross. Let's proceed. At 9:18, everyone was in position. I was in a dark office adjacent to the conference room, watching through a crack in the door. Saul was in the office on the opposite side. Fred was positioned near the elevator, ready to intercept anyone who tried to leave. Wolfe and Caesar were in the largest office, hidden but close. Inspector Kramer and 2 plainclothes detectives were in the stairwell, 1 floor down, connected to Wolfe via a borrowed cell phone on an open line. Jack Brenner and his photographer were in the storage room with recording equipment. Dr. Cross sat at the conference table, her hands folded, her expression terrified. She'd placed a laptop on the table, the prop that supposedly contained Quinn Thatcher's hidden files. In reality, it was her own computer, logged into harmless research documents, but Vannick wouldn't know that. The elevator chimed at 9:28. I watched through my door crack as the elevator opened, and 3 people stepped out. Charles Vannick, Marcus Brennan, and a woman I recognized from yesterday, Jacqueline Merritt, the security director who'd kicked me out. Vannick was exactly as Ori's photographs had suggested. Handsome, confident, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit. Marcus Brennan was a block of muscle in a cheaper suit, his eyes scanning the hallway with professional paranoia. Jacqueline Merritt walked slightly behind them, her expression neutral. They approached the conference room. Dr. Cross stood as they entered, and I heard her voice, shaky but controlled. "Charles, thank you for coming. Where is it?" Vannick's voice was all business. "Here," she gestured to the laptop. "I found it in Quinn's old workstation. It was hidden in a partition he'd created, encrypted but not well enough. When I accessed it, I found," she swallowed, "everything. Communications, transaction records, the Omega Protocol specifications." Vannick's expression didn't change, but I saw his jaw tighten. "Show me." Dr. Cross opened the laptop and angled it toward him. He leaned forward, studying the screen. For 30 seconds, the only sound was the hum of the building's ventilation system. Then Vannick straightened. "This is a problem." "I know. That's why I called you. I didn't know what else to do. If the authorities find this, they won't. Marcus, take the laptop. We'll destroy it." The drive, the backup, everything. And then we'll make sure there are no other copies. Yes, sir. Marcus Brennan moved toward the laptop. That's when Wolfe spoke from the doorway of his office. I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mr. Brennan. Everyone froze. Wolfe entered the conference room, moving with the careful deliberation of a man who rarely left his home and resented the necessity. Caesar walked beside him, 140 pounds of dignified menace. Behind them, Saul, Fred, and I emerged from our positions, forming a loose perimeter around the room. Charles Vannick's face went from confident to shocked to cold in the span of 3 seconds. Who the hell are you? Nero Wolfe, private investigator, and the man who's going to end your career, Mr. Vannick. This is private property. You're trespassing. Security. Your security is currently occupied. Inspector Kramer of the NYPD is in the building with 2 detectives and an arrest warrant. Mr. Jack Brenner of the Gazette is recording this conversation from the storage room across the hall, and Dr. Cross has been cooperating with us for the past 18 hours. Wolfe settled into one of the conference room chairs. They groaned under his weight and folded his hands across his stomach. Sit down, Mr. Vannick. We have much to discuss. I'm not sitting anywhere. Marcus, escort these people out. Use force if necessary. Marcus Brennan reached inside his jacket. I moved faster, pulling the revolver I'd borrowed from Wolfe's desk and aiming it at Brennan's center mass. Don't. Brennan froze, his hand inside his jacket. Gentlemen, Wolfe said calmly, let's avoid violence. Mr. Brennan, if you draw that weapon, Mr. Goodwin will shoot you. Inspector Kramer will arrest you for assault, and Mr. Brenner will photograph your body. None of those outcomes benefits you. Remove your hands slowly and sit down. Brennan looked at Vannick, who gave a tiny nod. Brennan removed his hand empty and sat. Jacqueline Merritt said, I'm calling our lawyers. By all means, call them. Tell them that we have Dr. Quinn Thatcher's encrypted files detailing the Omega Protocol. Tell them we have transaction records showing 8 months of espionage and treason. Tell them we have evidence that you murdered Dr. Thatcher and Bernard Lassiter. And tell them that all of this is currently being recorded by the press and will be in tomorrow morning's newspaper, regardless of any legal maneuvering you attempt. Vannick remained standing, but his confidence had cracked. You're bluffing. You have nothing. Do I? Then explain this. Wolfe nodded to Dr. Cross, who opened a different file on her laptop. The real files, the ones Professor Hewitt had decrypted. She turned the screen toward Vannick. He looked at it for 10 seconds, then he sat down. How did you? He stopped, his mind visibly working through possibilities. Quinn. That fool kept records. Dr. Thatcher kept evidence. He knew what you'd built. He knew what you were doing with it. And he knew he'd be killed for his knowledge. So he protected himself the only way he could, by documenting everything and ensuring that his evidence would surface even after his death. He left it with his wife. She gave it to me. We decrypted it. And now you're finished, Mr. Vannick. Vannick stared at the laptop, at the files that contained his destruction, and something in his face shifted. The arrogance drained away, replaced by calculation. He was a smart man, and smart men know when they're beaten. What do you want? He asked quietly. The truth. All of it. On the record, in front of witnesses. You'll confess to building the Omega Protocol, to selling classified intelligence, and to ordering the murders of Dr. Quinn Thatcher and Bernard Lassiter. Inspector Kramer will arrest you. The evidence will be presented to a grand jury, and you'll face trial. And if I refuse? Then the evidence goes to the press immediately. Every detail. Your crimes, your buyers, your transactions. The government will prosecute you for treason, which carries a potential death penalty. Your company will collapse. Your assets will be seized. Your name will become synonymous with betrayal. Wolfe leaned forward slightly. Or you can confess now, cooperate with the authorities, and perhaps negotiate a sentence that doesn't involve lethal injection. The choice is yours. Vannick looked at Marcus Brennan. We could fight this. The lawyers can't help you, I interrupted. We have your digital signature on communications ordering Quinn Thatcher's death. We have bank records of payments to foreign intelligence services. We have testimony from Dr. Cross. You're done. The only question is whether you go down fighting or admit what you've done. Lillian. Vannick turned to Dr. Cross, and for the first time, his voice held something like hurt. You betrayed me. You betrayed our country, she said quietly. I helped build the Omega Protocol because I thought it would protect American communications. You turned it into a weapon. You sold our secrets to the highest bidder. And when Quinn tried to stop you, you killed him. Don't talk to me about betrayal, Charles. You wrote the manual. Vannick stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Wolfe. If I confess, I want immunity for Lillian. She was following my orders. She didn't know what the Omega Protocol would be used for until it was too late. That's not entirely true, Dr. Cross said. I knew 6 weeks ago. I should have gone to the FBI then. My cowardice is my own. Nevertheless, Wolfe said, Dr. Cross has agreed to cooperate fully and testify against you. In exchange, the government will offer her immunity. That deal is already in place. Vannick closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked 10 years older. All right, I'll confess, but I want it on record that I'm doing this voluntarily, that I wasn't coerced. Of course. Inspector Kramer. Wolfe raised his voice slightly. Please join us. The door opened, and Kramer entered with his 2 detectives. He looked at Vannick with the expression of a man who'd just won a lottery he didn't know he'd entered. Charles Vannick, I'm placing you under arrest for espionage, treason, conspiracy to commit murder, and obstruction of justice. You have the right to remain silent. I waive my rights, Vannick said. I'll make a full statement, but I want my confession recorded by an independent witness, someone who can verify that I wasn't threatened or coerced. Mr. Brenner, Wolfe called, your presence is required. Jack Brenner emerged from the storage room, his photographer right behind him. Brenner was grinning like a man who'd just been handed the story of his career. Mr. Vannick, I'm recording. Please state your name and today's date for the record. Vannick took a deep breath. My name is Charles Vannick. Today is Friday, October 24th, 2025. I am CEO of Vannick Consolidated, and I am confessing to the following crimes. He talked for 47 minutes. He detailed the Omega Protocol's creation, its capabilities, and its deployment. He named his buyers, foreign intelligence services from Russia, China, and 3 others I'd never heard of. He described the transaction methods, the money laundering, the elaborate security measures designed to hide his activities from US oversight, and he confessed to ordering the murders of Dr. Quinn Thatcher and Bernard Lassiter. Quinn discovered the truth 6 weeks ago, Vannick said, his voice flat. He confronted me, said he'd go to the FBI unless I shut down the program. I refused. I offered him money. I threatened him with prosecution. Nothing worked. He was determined to expose everything. So I ordered Marcus to handle it, make it look like suicide, pay off the family, bury the evidence. And Bernard Lassiter? Kramer asked. He photographed Quinn's fall. He was across the street with a telephoto lens, freelance work, trying to capture corporate drama for some magazine. He got more than he bargained for. When we realized someone had photographed the murder, we had to find him. It took 2 days. Marcus tracked him down, confirmed he had the photo, and eliminated him. We thought we'd contained the problem. We didn't realize he'd already delivered the evidence to, he looked at me, to you. Why did you do it? I asked. You're already rich. You didn't need the money. It wasn't about money. It was about power. Information is power, Mr. Goodwin. Knowing what your enemies plan, what your competitors are doing, what governments are plotting, that's worth more than any amount of cash. I built the Omega Protocol because I could, because I wanted to know everything, and because I believed I was smart enough to get away with it. He smiled bitterly. I was wrong. Kramer handcuffed him. Marcus Brennan and Jacqueline Merritt were also arrested. Brennan for murder, Merritt for conspiracy and obstruction. All 3 were read their rights and led toward the elevator. Before they left, Vannick turned to Wolfe. You're quite good at this. I'm adequate, Wolfe replied. Better than adequate. You trapped me perfectly. I walked into your ambush, convinced I was in control. That's a rare talent. It's not talent, Mr. Vannick. It's simply refusal to tolerate murder and treason. You made the mistake of believing that wealth and intelligence granted you immunity from consequences. You were mistaken. Good evening. Kramer led them away. The elevator doors closed, and suddenly the conference room was very quiet. Dr. Cross sat at the table, tears streaming down her face. It's over. It is, Wolfe agreed. You'll need to provide detailed testimony to federal prosecutors. You'll likely spend months debriefing intelligence agencies, but you'll be protected, and you'll have a chance to rebuild the systems you helped compromise. That's more than most people in your position could hope for." She nodded, unable to speak. Jack Brenner was checking his recording equipment, his grin wider than ever. "This is the biggest story I've ever touched. Front page, above the fold, maybe a Pulitzer." "Perhaps," Wolfe said. "Just ensure your reporting is accurate. I won't have my name attached to sloppy journalism. It'll be perfect. Scout's honor." Brenner and his photographer left, already planning their layout. Saul, Fred and I exchanged looks. We'd done it. We'd trapped a traitor, solved 2 murders, and exposed one of the largest espionage operations in recent history. And Wolfe had done it all without leaving the city limits. Well, almost all. "Can we go home now?" I asked. "Yes," Wolfe said, standing with visible relief. "I've had quite enough of glass fortresses for one lifetime. Caesar, come. We're leaving this monument to corporate hubris and returning to civilization." We took the elevator down. We walked through the lobby. We emerged onto 6th Avenue, where the city was still alive with Friday night energy, people laughing, cars honking, the eternal chaos of New York. Wolfe stood on the sidewalk, looked up at the glass fortress towering above us, and said, "Fragile power, Archie. Build walls of glass, and anyone with sufficient cause can shatter them." Mr. Vannick learned that lesson tonight. "You think he'll actually serve time?" "Oh yes. The federal government doesn't tolerate treason. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Assuming he survives the trial, some of his buyers won't appreciate his confession." Wolfe walked toward our waiting car. "But that's not our concern. We solved the case. We exposed the truth. And now I'd like to return to my orchids, my chair and my routine. In that order." We drove back to the brownstone through the October night. The city had never looked better. Chaotic, loud, imperfect and gloriously alive. By the time we arrived home, it was nearly midnight. The other dogs greeted us at the door. Mars, Apollo, Minerva and Diana, their tails wagging with obvious relief. Even they understood that something had been concluded, some threat eliminated. Fritz had waited up, and he'd prepared a late-night snack, cold duck, fresh bread and beer. We sat in the office, Wolfe behind his desk, Caesar at his side, the rest of us in various chairs, and reviewed the evening's victory. "Saul, Fred, Ori, excellent work," Wolfe said, raising his beer. "Archie, your investigation was thorough and courageous, even when threatened with violence. We succeeded because we worked together, because we refused to be intimidated, and because we remembered that truth is more powerful than any fortress, glass or otherwise." "Hear, hear," Saul said. We drank, we ate, and gradually, the tension of the past 3 days began to fade. At 1 a.m., Wolfe pushed himself to his feet. "Gentlemen, I'm going to bed. My plants need attention tomorrow morning, and I require sleep before I can properly admire their blossoms. Good night." He left, Caesar following. The other dogs settled into their evening positions, Mars by the front door, Apollo in the hallway, Minerva near the office, Diana watching the garden. Saul, Fred, and Ori departed shortly after, each promising to submit detailed reports in the morning. I remained in the office, typing up my own notes and thinking about the case. Dr. Quinn Thatcher had died for discovering the truth. Bernard Lassiter had died for photographing it. But their deaths hadn't been meaningless. Because of them, we'd exposed treason, stopped an espionage operation, and trapped a killer. Not bad for 3 days' work. I finished my notes at 2 a.m., locked the office, and climbed the stairs to my 3rd-floor room. Outside my window, the city hummed with life. Somewhere out there, Charles Vannick sat in a jail cell, contemplating the ruins of his empire. And in the brownstone on West 35th Street, Nero Wolfe slept peacefully, surrounded by his dogs, his orchids, and his unshakable conviction that intelligence, courage, and stubbornness could solve any problem. He was right. As usual, Saturday morning arrived with the kind of sunshine that makes you forget. October is the anteroom to winter. I came downstairs at 8:30 to find Fritz cooking breakfast. The dogs sprawled throughout the kitchen like furry pillows, and Wolfe already in the plant rooms for his morning orchid ritual. The newspaper was on the kitchen table. Jack Brenner had worked fast. The story was front page, above the fold, exactly as he'd predicted. Billionaire defense contractor, arrested for treason, exclusive, Vannick built secret master key to decrypt US military communication. The article was thorough, accurate, and devastating. Brenner had included quotes from Vannick's confession, background on the Omega Protocol, and interviews with unnamed federal officials who promised swift prosecution. The story mentioned Nero Wolfe's role in solving the case, described as the reclusive private investigator who orchestrated the elaborate sting operation but kept most details vague, protecting Dr. Cross and our methods. It was good journalism. Brenner had earned his Pulitzer. Inspector Kramer called at 9 o'clock. Wolfe there? In the plant rooms. You know the schedule. Tell him the FBI took over the case officially at 7 a.m. this morning. They're tearing apart Vannick Consolidated's records, interviewing everyone, building their prosecution. The U.S. attorney says it's the biggest espionage case since Aldrich Ames. Vannick's lawyers are already talking plea bargain, but the government's not interested. They want him tried publicly, convicted publicly, and imprisoned for life. What about Dr. Cross? Immunity deals confirmed. She's cooperating fully. The NSA is already working with her to rebuild the compromised systems. She'll probably end up with a permanent government position. Can't have someone with her knowledge working in the private sector anymore. And Marcus Brennan? Confessed to both murders. He's looking at consecutive life sentences. Jacqueline Merritt is cooperating, giving testimony in exchange for a reduced sentence. The whole operation is unraveling. Nice work, Inspector. It was your work, Goodwin, yours and Wolfe's. I just arrested them. Tell Wolfe the commissioner wants to meet with him. Official commendation, maybe a civilian medal. He'll refuse. I figured, but I had to offer. Kramer paused. Listen, Archie, this was something. We stopped a traitor. We exposed massive corruption. We solved 2 murders. That doesn't happen often. Tell Wolfe. I said thank you. I will. He hung up. At 11 o'clock, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms, looking satisfied. He'd spent 2 hours with his orchids, his preferred form of celebration, and now he was ready to resume normal life. He settled into his desk chair, Caesar taking his position beside him. The other dogs had dispersed throughout the brownstone, finally relaxing after 3 days of heightened alert. Inspector Kramer called. I said, "The FBI's taken over the case. Vannick's lawyers are talking plea, but the government wants a trial. Dr. Cross has immunity. Marcus Brennan confessed to both murders, and the commissioner wants to give you a medal. Tell the commissioner I decline." Already assumed. There's also this. I handed him the newspaper. Wolfe read Brenner's article with the focused attention he usually reserved for recipes. When he finished, he folded the paper and set it aside. Adequate journalism. Mr. Brenner captured the essentials without compromising our methods. I'm satisfied. The case is closed. It is. Dr. Thatcher's widow will receive justice. Bernard Lassiter's family will know his death wasn't meaningless, and Charles Vannick will spend the remainder of his life contemplating the consequences of arrogance. He opened his center drawer and removed a bottle of beer, his preferred lunch beverage. A successful conclusion, Archie. Worth leaving the brownstone? Never, but occasionally necessary. He poured beer into a glass, with the reverence usually reserved for fine wine. The glass fortress is shattered. The Omega Protocol is exposed. And we are home. I require nothing more. He raised his glass. I raised mine. Coffee, not beer, because someone had to remain alert, and we drank. Outside, the city continued its eternal dance. Somewhere criminals plotted and victims suffered. Eventually, some of them would find their way to our door, bringing their problems and their secrets. And when they did, Nero Wolfe would be here, in his chair, surrounded by his dogs and his orchids, ready to solve whatever impossible puzzle they presented. Because that's what he did. And because, as Charles Vannick had learned too late, you can build walls of glass or brick, but if Nero Wolfe decides to look through them, you're already seen,